All right, ready to jump into another deep dive. Today we're looking at some pretty epic stories.
Oh, yeah.
King David's life in First Chronicles chapters 17 through 20. It's really a place where faith and leadership
Yeah.
and some pretty intense battles all kind of come together.
Really collide.
Yeah. So we're going to uncover a surprising twist
Okay.
in David's plan to build a temple for God
Okay.
and then explore his family legacy,
Interesting.
which involves taking down giants.
Wow, that's quite a combination. It's going to be fascinating to see how all of this unfolds, especially in these chapters. There's so much to unpack about David's personal faith
Right.
and how that plays out in his leadership. And I think there are some timeless truths woven into these stories about courage and humility, and that unshakable nature of God's promises.
And it all kind of starts with David's grand vision, right? He wants to build this magnificent temple for God. It seems like a pretty noble aspiration.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, he even consults the prophet Nathan about it.
Right.
And Nathan initially gives him the go-ahead.
He does. Seems like a good plan.
Yeah. So what happens next?
Well, you'd think things would just move forward smoothly, but then we get this really dramatic shift in the story. That night, God actually speaks to Nathan.
Oh, wow.
And reveals that David is not the one who's meant to build the temple after all.
Oh, that's a little unexpected. Why the sudden change of plans?
Well, this is where I think the story takes on a much deeper meaning. God's promise to David, it extends way beyond just like a physical building, It's about establishing David's lineage forever, a dynasty that will ultimately lead to the arrival of Jesus.
Now, that connection to Jesus isn't something that jumps out right away.
Right.
So how can we actually see that link in the text itself?
Well, the verses actually give us a pretty clear connection. So in 1 Chronicles 17:11, God tells David, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, and I will establish his kingdom forever. Centuries later, we see this promise being fulfilled in Luke 1:33. It says, he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end.
Wow, that really puts things in perspective. David's story, it becomes part of this much, much larger narrative. But how does David handle this news? I mean, this is a powerful king. He's used to getting his way.
It's a great question, and I think David's response is honestly a profound example of humility.
Okay.
Instead of being disappointed or questioning God's decision, he's just overwhelmed with gratitude.
Interesting.
He recognizes the immense blessings that he's already received,
Yeah.
and acknowledges that God's plan, it's ultimately what matters most.
Some people might hear that and say that that's kind of a passive reaction from a king. How is it actually an act of leadership?
That's a good point. I think it's easy to see David's humility here as passive, but it's actually a sign of incredible strength. Think about it. He is a warrior king, used to taking charge, right? To surrender his ambition to God's plan, it takes a tremendous amount of humility and faith. He's actually modeling true leadership by trusting in something bigger than himself.
That's a really powerful lesson for us today. I mean, It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest act of leadership is knowing when to step back and trust in that greater plan.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our personal ambitions, while they're important, they don't always line up with the bigger picture.
All right, so we've explored God's promise to David.
Yeah.
But his story, it doesn't end there. I mean, there are still battles to be fought.
Oh, absolutely. Chapters 18 and 19 are just filled with these military victories.
Wow.
David, with his general Joab leading the charge, they take on the Philistines, Moabites, and a bunch of other nations. It's really a period of remarkable success for David and his army.
Joab, David's general, he seems like a fascinating figure.
He is.
He's got this brilliance as a military strategist, but he's also clearly a man of faith.
Yeah.
And there's this really inspiring quote from him in 1 Chronicles 19:13, where he's rallying his troops. He says, be strong and let us fight bravely for our people and the cities of our God. The Lord will do what is good in his sight.
I love that quote. It shows the balance,
Yeah.
between action and faith. He's not just passively waiting for God to act. He recognizes that he has a part to play, but he also acknowledges that ultimately victory, it depends on God's will.
And that reminder to be strong and fight bravely, it really resonates even today.
Oh, yeah.
We all face challenges.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes real courage to step up and take action.
Exactly. I think Joab provides a great blueprint for how we can face our own battles,
Yeah.
We shouldn't shy away from taking action, but we should also remember to place our trust in something larger than ourselves.
All right, let's move on to chapter 20, where things get even more interesting. David's winning streak continues, but this time he encounters a pretty unique opponent, a giant.
Uh-oh.
With 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot.
Wow.
That must have been an intimidating sight.
Oh, absolutely. You can only imagine how formidable this giant must have appeared, But here's the twist. It's not David who ends up defeating this giant.
Right.
It's his nephew Shimei.
Wow, that speaks volumes about the legacy that David is building.
Absolutely.
It's not just about his own accomplishments.
Right.
It's about inspiring those around him.
Exactly.
To embrace that same courage and faith.
It highlights the impact of mentorship, David's influence extended far beyond his own victories.
Yeah.
He was empowering those around him to really step into their potential.
As we wrap up this deep dive into David's story, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think there are 3 main things to remember. First, God's promises are enduring and trustworthy. Even when they don't unfold according to our timeline, there's a bigger plan at work. Second, true leadership, as exemplified by David, it's grounded in humility and gratitude. And finally, we are all called to face our own challenges with that balance of courage and faith, just like Joab, and to pass that on to others like David did.
There's a lot to reflect on from these chapters. One final thought for you to ponder as you go about your day. How might you, like David and his family, inspire courage and faith in the people around you? Until next time, keep exploring.
Keep diving.